Hi, I'm Haley, and this is The Witch's Lair. Welcome back. Today we're going to be going over and we're going to finally start the series of astrology knowledge that I'm going to be sharing on this podcast. Astrology is a really big part of my life. It's almost consuming, but I enjoy it deeply. And so one of the many things with The Witch's Lair is that I wanted to start sharing about astrology in a way that helps get all my little thoughts out, but also in a way that shares information and is educational. So again, I started this podcast for my women's circle, Daughters of the Moon. And so I know many of them are going to be listening to this podcast and this episode specifically because anytime they're around me, I'm rambling off something about astrology and I'm asking to look at their charts. And so it'll make it a little bit more better understanding for my girls. So so I thought I would just go through the most common vocabulary words, if you will, with the astrology system, because I feel like when it comes to astrology, it gets a lot clearer when you are able to understand the words that go with it. A lot of people feel like it's really, really confusing. Astrology is really confusing. And I think that is valid because it's such a vast topic. There's so much about it. But astrology is a symbolic system, and it's like any other language that, once you start understanding the vocabulary of it, everything becomes, easier to understand. So I thought that's a good place to start. So when I am having these episodes and I start breaking things down more, maybe it'll be a bit easier for you to follow because you know what I'm talking about. So I thought that we would start with just what is astrology? What does the word astrology mean when you hear it? And it's the study of how the planets and the stars move through the movement of the earth and how they are related to our life here. And so when you're looking at like a birth chart, a natal chart, that's actually like a snapshot, a picture of where all those planets were orbiting around the earth, the exact moment you were born. And when you look at that, it's a circle and they're orbiting and we're circling. And when you're looking at a natal chart, you'll notice that it's always, divided up like pie slices, and that themselves is them breaking up the sky of where in the cosmos where they're rotating and breaking it down into houses. And I was skipping ahead on that. We're going to come back to houses because I'm getting ahead of myself. So, but basically a birth chart is a snapshot of where the planets were in the sky the exact moment you were born. People often think that the chart tells them about their life, but the chart shows potential patterns and how you live those with your own choices, because free will is a thing. So it's always, for me, the fun part of studying a natal chart is like, this is the most, what's the word I'm looking here? Generic, or this is the most, commonly, what's the word? Oh, there's like a technical phrase for this. So sorry, I'm getting my head about me here. It's been a while since I've recorded. Cliche, this is the most cliche way this sign and this planet and this transit or whatever shows up, but then going through and talking to someone and hearing their life experience and how they process things, and then how all the placements are talking to each other, it's not always the cliche meaning, but it is fun when it happens just because it's a little ironic. But moving on, we have the zodiac, and I know everybody's very aware of what the zodiac is because that's where we all start. What's your zodiac sign? What's your zodiac sign? But the zodiac is a circle of 12 signs that the planets move through the sky. So we're looking at the constellations, basically. We're looking at stars with the zodiac. People think the zodiac signs are only constellations, but they're not. In the zodiac, it's a symbolic system that divides the sky into 12 sections. So the zodiac and the houses, very similar, because each zodiac sign is ruled by a specific house, and that's where those are stationed. So you'll hear them both ways. Like, for example, the 8th house is, it rules over Scorpio. So that would be its section of the sky. And so that's what you're seeing when you're talking about the way it divides up. So moving on, we have your sun sign. So when you're looking at your natal chart, or you're looking at a current transit chart where everything's moving at and so forth, with the sun sign, this is the sign that the zodiac is in. It's kind of, to me, I like to refer to it as the season. It was the season in which you were born, because that's really what the sun signs are to me when we're going through the natural calendar. Cancer season, Leo season, seasons. People think that it's what their entire personality is, and that's where astrology gets a little muddied up, I feel, because we were raised or brought up around or influenced by the common media of zodiacs just being, well, I'm a Cancer, I'm a Leo. And with that, it's like, well, that's just the sun. That's just where the sun was when you were born. All the other planets are doing something too. So the sun itself is just one of the larger parts of your chart, but it's not the only ruling factor of who you are when it comes to the signs. And that's what I really love about when you look at a natal chart. Like, my belief, and this is just a belief, I feel like when we fell from the divine the day that we were born, we like went through and hit all the signs of where the planets are at, and not all the signs, but hit all the planets that are in their position the day that we were born. Our spirit did, and then boom, we were born. And so that's why I like to talk about how they all influence us. Everyone's belief is different, so that's not finite, but I like to think of it that way just because it seems cool to me. So moving on, you have your sun sign. That's who you are. It's not entirely who you are, but it is who you are. Me, I'm a Cancer. And so moving on to your moon sign, it shows your emotions, your soul, how you process emotions, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel nurtured. Most people mistake the moon sign as just like your mood swings, but it's really not only your emotions and how you process it, but it's kind of like who you are when you're at home, when your guard's down, when you take your bra off and you're just hanging out on the couch, you know what I mean? But the moon just describes your inner emotional world and instincts too. So me, I'm a Cancer sun, and my moon is in Scorpio. So what does that look like? As examples, emotionally, I am guarded. If you look at the Scorpio, what does a Scorpio look like? And I think I actually learned the sign language of Scorpio. It's this one. There we go. It's kind of like a bunny, but maybe it's more like this, but it's the two. Anyways, but when you look at a Scorpio, it's got its tail up, it's ready to fight, and it's very defensive, and that I am. I try to control my defensiveness, but I don't trust easily. I don't believe easily, and that's personal. But it's also a water sign. It's empathetic. It's being a Cancer with a moon in Scorpio. Cancer's also very hard shell, hard outside, soft, mushy inside. And also on the defense, it's always like this. So these two, I am ready to fight. But one thing about Cancer is that it's really about family. And the one thing I will do is square up about my family. And I wish that didn't sound as it does, but it does. I mean, I have no shame in that. The only times I've ever been in a fight or been close to a physical fight was because of my mother. Not because my mother did anything, but because someone was messing with my mother, and I did not like that. So those were those younger days of mine. So little hot-headed Scorpio moon, Cancer, really ready to knuck if you buck. So that's kind of like a peek of like sun and moon signs and how those work, both water signs, both empathetic. And you'll hear me talk about water sign, air sign, because each zodiac also has an element. And I think learning the elements of a zodiac sign is very helpful to understand how they work. So both Scorpio, Cancer, both water signs, both empathetic, both compassionate, emotionally fluid, understanding emotions. Cancer itself is very much known as like the therapist and the big listener and the mother. It's ruled by the moon because every sign is ruled by a planet. So you're going to see a pattern here. Everything's rotating, everything's orbiting, and I'm hitting my mic. So moving on. You have your rising sign or your ascendant sign. And this one I feel like people get wrong a lot because it's such an interesting sign itself, because it's not a planet. And that's a big misconception that comes with it, is that it's not a planet. It is a point. It is, the point in the sky where the sun was sitting on the eastern horizon the day that you were born. So the sun was in Cancer season Cancer. But when I was born, it was in Leo, the rising sign. It was sitting up in Leo. And so, and that's why your time is really important when it comes to knowing your birth chart, because of your rising sign, because it changes every 2 hours. And every time it changes, it affects other things on the map here too. So it's really important to know like your houses with your time and so forth. So the rising sign is, what was coming up over the horizon the day that you were born. And mine's in Leo, which is very positive. It's ruled by the sun. People often say that it represents how other people see you, but it's actually your approach to life, and how the rest of your chart is going to flow and structure because of its influence of the 2-hour change. So I do still feel like it is often that you'll see a rising sign on how people will read other people, from the kind of like reading a book by its cover. So if you saw me, a rising Leo, Cancer sun, moon Scorpio, you'd be like, oh wow, she's got really long hair like a Leo. It's very, let me see, yeah. My mane, I have, it's distinctive with my white. And that's a signature thing with Leos. Leo placements love Leo tattoos, same with Scorpios. So I've never, well, I don't want to say never, but I cannot remember a Leo that I have met that didn't have a lion tattoo. And if you're a Leo and you're listening to this podcast and you have a lion tattoo, yes, I'm calling you out. And it's okay. I love your tattoo. It looks really cool. Same with Scorpio. Scorpio, I'm very much, they always have a little scorpion somewhere on them. And I can't blame them, because that's a cute takeaway. I would get a little crab on me, but tattoos are people, even though I have a few. If you hear my cat, hold on, let me see if I can bring her on. Say hello, Beatrice. Yes, I am a witch with a cat, a black cat. She's a tortie, and she's just a baby. Say hello. You hear her purring? Okay, she stopped. I think there's a cat outside that's been messing with her, so she's got a lot to say. Anyways, distractions. Okay, so we've got our sun, we've got our moon, we've got our rising. We're understanding things and stuff. My mic is in my face. Sorry, don't judge me. Again, I'm messing with this freaking mic today. And you know why? It's because we are in a Mercury retrograde. And we're going to get into that Mercury retrograde. What the frick does that mean? But one of the things that it means, communication, because Mercury, and technology, because communication. And I keep messing with my mic, talking, technology, mic. Anyways, all right, sorry. One thing I do is ramble in this podcast, and you're just going to accept that. Love you so much. So moving on, we have the planets. So in astrology, planets represent different parts of our personality and our life experience. If you hear someone say, what's your big three? They're talking about what your sun, moon, and rising sign is. But if you hear them say, what's your big six? That means sun, moon, rising, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. And those are the main planets that make up your personality. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all those, behind it, those do make up part of your personality, but they're more of your life experience. So like Saturn, and I'm going to get into this, is about life lessons and things like that, where Mercury is how you communicate. They mean something each, but all working towards who you are. But like I said, planets are representing parts of our personality and our life experience. So Mercury is about thinking and communication. Venus is about love and attraction, aesthetics. Mars is about action and drive, how we respond, how we navigate. People often think that that's like what completely controls our behavior, but they're just types of energies, not really commands. Because, one thing that people will be often say like, oh, I met them and they were nothing like a Cancer that I knew, they were nothing like a Virgo that I knew. And it's one of the big factors is there's always two sides of a sign, of a planet, of, a zodiac, and that's the shadow and the light of it, or the evolved and unevolved. So just like different ways of looking at the structure itself. I don't know what is going on with this mic right now. Don't judge me. I keep messing with it. Stay. Anyways, so going back to the houses, it's how they divide up the chart in 12 sections, just like the zodiacs. So we're not going to go through every single house right now, but it's 1 through 12. And when you look at the chart in a circle, it starts here, 12, 11, whatever. But they each mean something, like career, children, parents, family, communication, relationships, friendships, personal growth, transformation, the taboo and metaphysical and philosophy. Like they cover so many. And that's, I think, when you get into houses, first you learn the zodiacs, then you learn the planets, then you learn the houses. And when you get to the houses, it's sometimes like, okay, I need to step back. What? It's a lot. But once you start to get the swing of it, it actually makes it a little bit easier. Well, not a little bit easier. It really does. Because some things just start to click after a while. But they think that the misunderstanding with everything is that it'll predict like events, like it's an absolute. But the thing is it's just like where energy tends to show up in your life and not what must happen. So like, for example, how would I read this? One of my favorite things to see, and that verbiage is probably not correct to use, but I really think it's cool when I've read a birth chart and I saw, like, for example, I saw a woman who had Lilith, which is tiny planet. I think it's actually a moon, if I'm getting it. Yeah, because dark moon, Lilith, Lilith in general, love her, praise that. It was in Aries in the first house. So this person in their first house is like what very much with the rising sign. It's what makes us up in our genetic makeup, how we look, our physical body. It talks about the physical body. Aries being a planet of aggression, war, action. It's a fire element. It's a tiny planet that's very mad. Not always, but and then Lilith is the great wild feminine. It talks about the feminine a lot. And so I saw this in a girl's chart and I asked her, I was like, do you have like endometriosis or like something with your uterus, some type of physical difficulties that's painful? And yeah, she had endometriosis, and then she was getting diagnosed with POTS, which I don't believe is actually direct of a uterus, but it's very common in the female body. And the thing is when you look at Lilith, it doesn't talk about like female anatomy. It talks about the wild feminine. And so I took that with the very feminine sign. And there's more. There's asteroids like Juno and so forth that people don't always commonly talk about, but also have that energy of the woman. So is the moon. But yeah, there's just ways that it can show up. It's like, oh, they had Lilith and Aries in the first house. They ended up having needing to have a hysterectomy, things like that. Or somebody with, let's say, 12th house, the subconscious, so the mind, Taurus in Mars. So Mars and Taurus in the 12th house. Mars, how we take action, how we navigate. Taurus is an earth sign, and typically it's grounded, but the unevolved side of Taurus is very about its luxuries, its indulgence, keyword indulgence. Somebody with a Mars, Taurus, 12th house might have an addiction problem. Will they? Absolutely? No. But it's something that I have seen in the studies. That's something that, that's the whole part of astrology, is collecting charts like little lab rats and studying them and reading them. And there's a lot of astrologers that go back into history and like, if you don't watch the podcast, watch the Astrology podcast. Love the Astrology podcast. So many episodes. They were talking about Saturn and Aries because we just shifted in that. No, but the podcast wasn't talking about the actual Saturn Aries transit when they brought this up. I think they were just talking about history. That's one thing I love about that podcast, is they talk about history stuff. But it was talking about how George Washington was the first president, right? We all know that. But he really didn't have that much experience of being a president. I mean, who does? But he was a general. He led an army. He led a war. And so it's like Saturn, he had Saturn and Aries, and Saturn is very much like long-term lessons and structure. It's the father of the zodiac, if you will, of the planets. And then you had an Aries, a planet of aggression. And it's like, oh, he was a leader of a country after leading a war. That's crazy, And so just like ways to explain like how these things might show up in a chart. So. One thing you'll hear and see if you're looking at your birth chart and you're actually looking at the circle chart, because that's the birth chart itself. The stuff that they list off to the side, they put it in short form, is just helping you read it. But when you look at the chart, you often see lines in the middle connecting spots, and it's like usually blue, red, and green, depending on where you're running the chart through. But it's those lines are talking about aspects. The key word is aspects. And it's like, what's an aspect? And those are the angles between planets that show their energies and how they're interacting. So they'll point out, like, I should have gotten my chart for this one. I'm trying to, I have so many aspects that I want to point out, and I'm like, reel it in, crazy. So we could talk about how my moon in Scorpio talks to my Aries midheaven. And midheaven is the 10th house. And so they're directly opposite almost from each other, but they're both ruled by by Mars. And how are those aspects talking? How are these things talking to, my moon in a water sign that's ruled by fire almost. And then my highest peak in my chart being in a fire sign, and that's how I work and how I take action. And it also, so it's just talking about how all the planets are talking to each other and where there's conflict and where there's not, so, and how it's all sitting on the axis. And that's a technical part of astrology too. So when you hear aspects, it's actually one of the most important parts of reading the chart, because they show how different energies cooperate or challenge. So like a challenge for me would have to be my Mars in Leo, Mars, how I take action, and my moon in Scorpio. I feel the challenges of having those two are, we want to do stuff and we want to get stuff done. But as a water sign in your moon placement, it's talking about downward and inward energy. So sometimes I have a failure to launch. Also, Scorpio is impatient. So when I'm navigating things, Mars and Leo, I want to go, I want to get it done. And if it's not working out, if things are being difficult, I am going to end up losing my shit, because Scorpio is going to lose its shit and it's going to cry while it does it. So that's my challenge. Just one. Anyway, so moving on, elements. So like I was saying before, the zodiac signs belong to 4 types of energies, and those are the elements of fire, earth, air, and water. So fire, action and passion. Earth is practical and grounded. Air is thinking and communication. Water, emotion, and intuition. And the elements are just showing how energies move and express itself, and help really better break down the zodiac itself. Going on, one of the words that I feel people don't really hear that often or understand is modality. What is the modality of a sign? And it describes how a sign operates or moves energy. So you have the cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinal, fixed, mutable modality. And cardinal starts things, stabilizes things, and mutable adapts and changes. I feel like when we're looking at the modalities, it's like how a sign acts, not just what they are like. So like, while fixed is about stability and things like that, it's also about stubbornness. Fixed or set in place. So who's a fixed sign? Taurus is fixed. Man, my modalities are off. I know cardinal, like I actually know these off of the bat, because I know cardinal is Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries. Fixed is Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. And mutable is going to be, and I was missing an air sign with that. Who's fixed in an air sign? Aquarius. And so like looking at just the fixed signs, let's stop there. They're very set in place. Like Taurus is my favorite fixed sign to explain fixed, because it's ruled by a bull. And so when we're looking at the bull, it's like, okay, think about a bull out in its pasture. It's out there. It's eating its hay. It don't give a shit about you. You're calling it to come in. You're shaking the feed bag. It ain't moving. It's set in stone. And that's very much Taurus. Taurus is going to do what it wants to do. It's going to act how it wants to act. It'll respond when it's ready to respond. And when it does respond, and it has to respond in a very forceful way, it's going to be a little salty. But those are just different ways to look at the way that they move and respond to situations. And I really do love looking at the modalities of signs because I feel like they are very helpful once you really understand each modality. So next up is Mercury retrograde. Very common word you're going to hear. I feel like that's the retrograde we hear the most about because we have at least 2 a year. So when you hear retrograde, it means that it looks like a planet is rotating backwards in the sky from the Earth's perspective. Because you have to remember, all these studies are done from here, because before we had technology and AI, we had men outside with telescopes and parchment paper. Hopefully women were there too, but they like to write that out. So sitting here looking up, it looks like the planets are moving backwards, but they're not. It's just the perspective of how the Earth is turning and the planets are rotating, and sometimes it comes off that way. And it's a counting process with all of the planets in their rotation. It's all about timing to know where they're going, where they've been, and that's how we can predict transits in the future, because it's all a timing sequence. And so that's how they know the Mercury retrograde is coming out, because they've timed it out. They know how, and that's how we know when it's going to be rotating backwards. It's not really rotating backwards. People think Mercury retrograde and they think everything's going to go wrong and everything's going to get set on fire, and that's not accurate either. Mercury retrograde specifically is about reviewing, revisiting, and slowing down communication or plans. Right now we're actually in a Mercury retrograde, which I think is really funny for me, just because I haven't done an episode on here in like a couple of weeks. And I was like, dang, I'm out of it. I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. And I finally did it during a Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And what's crazy is right now, not only is Mercury in Pisces, but the Sun, Mars, and Venus is also in Pisces and the North Node. Another sign that, or another term I'll get to in a little bit. But I was just kind of laughing at myself because I was like, man, I want to do this episode. I know I need to do this episode. Why? I don't know what I even texted my friends. I was like, tell me to do it. Tell me that it's not dumb and just to do it. Because I really didn't know where to start with this astrology podcast, or like not astrology podcast, but the astrology series within this podcast, because it's not the only thing I'm going to talk about through the whole podcast, but it's like, how do I approach it? Because it's such a big topic and I have so many thoughts and I could ramble about it for so long. But, and so they were like, no, do it. And I was like, what is my deal? And they looked at the transits and I was like, of course, Pisces, it's too many thoughts. It's doubt. With the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and we just went through an eclipse in Virgo, it's very much the energy that you're supposed to be reviewing and revisiting where you blur the lines, because that's very Pisces energy. It's very much the time to look at where you're seeing illusion and fantasy when you need to get back to reality. It shakes that up and makes you look inward. Where do we overstretch? Where do we lose our boundaries? And how do we do better? How do we communicate our boundaries better? Big thing, Mercury, communication, Pisces, illusions, and mental fog. So the Mercury retrograde is really having us look at those things. Love that. And going with the Virgo eclipse and full moon and eclipse, it was very much the energy of like, Virgo will stay busy to avoid its thoughts. And the Virgo eclipse was like, nah, you're going to look at that. And the thing is I don't have Virgo in my chart, but one thing I'm going to do is stay busy to avoid thoughts. And yesterday I woke up and my brain was like, you're going to think of everything that you haven't been thinking of. And it's going to suck. It was actually pretty good because I was able to pinpoint problems and release them. So, woo. Moving on, we have transits. So transits describe where the planets are moving in the sky right now and how they interact with your birth chart. So we're in a Pisces stellium. And again, I'll explain that stellium word here in a little bit. We have all these planets in Pisces, and we have we're in the Mercury retrograde, then we're going to come out of it. And, Saturn and Neptune were in Pisces last year, and they both transited into Aries this year in January, and I think the beginning of February. But anyways, those are transits when the planets are constantly changing, and that's why you want to look at your chart and the current transits to see how everything's talking to each other. So moving on, and then stellium. So stellium is where 3 or more planets are in the same sign or house. So people think it just means of having a lot of one sign, but really it's just a concentration of energy, and it puts a strong emphasis on your chart with it. So I'm not going to break down the planets, really. I'm not going to break down the signs. I just wanted to break down those common vocabulary words that you're going to hear me talk about more as we go through the channel. You're going to eventually have episodes from me where I go over each zodiac sign and each planet, and then we'll break down how we look at them in charts. And I'm actually thinking about, when I get to the chart part of it, I can maybe start inviting people to sit with me and talk and to use their charts as an example. Like there is one girl in Women's Circle, and I don't know if I should be dropping names, so I won't. But her chart is all Gemini. It's like the Gemini stellium of Gemini stelliums. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all her big 6. And I think going into Saturn too, and Jupiter. I think she had more than that. I actually have to look, because you have to hear this, because I'm just like, every time I see her chart or she talks about her chart, I'm like, I am fascinated by you. I am fascinated by you. Oh, goodness gracious. Where is this girl's chart? Because we were just talking about it. I have to explain this. And I know she's listening and laughing right now. And when she posted it in group today, there was people that were like, what? Okay, so no, it was just her big 6. I mean, maybe it's more. She only gave her big 6. But all big 6, all in Gemini. Fascinating. She's so much fun. Sweet sweetie. I love Gemini. They get a lot of bad rep. I mean, all signs have their bad rep depending on the experience that someone had with the sign, but I love Gemini. I really do. So anyways, so this is our episode on astrology vocabulary, breaking down those common vocabulary words that you're going to hear, those common words that you'll hear. I keep saying vocabulary words, and it's very redundant. But if you have requests, comment below. If you have questions, comment below. I'm always here to help as much as possible. Or for my Women's Circle girlies, you know where to find me. You know I got you. But as always, may the sun guide you and the earth ground you. Bye.